Welcome to NTC After the Fight, where Lieutenant Colonel Drew Steadman, Senior Brigade Trainer, facilitates a conversation with 2nd Stryker Brigade Combat Team, 2nd Infantry Divisions, Brigade Commander, and Brigade Command Sergeant Major, Colonel Johnathon Chung and Command Sergeant Major Christopher Mullinax, about their experiences during Decisive Action Rotation 19-10 at the National Training Center.
All right. Colonel Chung, Sergeant Major Mullinax, thank you for taking the time here to talk about your rotation here, taking Lancer Brigade through NTC. Over the last 3 weeks, it's been a heck of a time. You guys have, the soldiers have done an incredible job. It's been an honor for the ops group and the teams out there to cover down and just to be part of your formation as you go through and learn the lessons that we have and then increase the readiness in the way that we've done. So, so congratulations for you guys for getting through it, sir, and Sergeant Major. Yeah. Over the last 3 weeks here, it's been the NTC experience is challenging, and so just looking at some of the things that the brigade accomplished and some of the things you've been faced with, just as an example here, 167 kilometers of forward movement, across the desert, 233 hours of continuous combat and contact, 7 combined arms breaches, 459 friendly fire missions that you guys fired. 59 TOC jumps, 66 TAC jumps, a lot of movement around the battlefield, and then the enemy Black Horse brought in 23 chemical attacks across the 19 days that you were in the box, 11 enemy air attacks, 70 hours of jamming, 8 enemy spoiling attacks, 25 insurgent attacks, and then 1,540 enemy indirect fire missions. So looking over all that in the last 3 weeks here during this rotation, what are you most proud of about how the brigade performed?
I think I'd start off by saying, I'm incredibly appreciative to have this opportunity with Command Sergeant Major Mullinax, because there's nowhere else that you're going to get a first-class event that's led obviously by the ops group and what Black Horse offers to give you a chance to truly see yourself, see your organization, and then recognize some things that you can take and then apply back in home station training. I think personally the things that I'm most proud of the fact is, seeing the standards and discipline of soldiers in small units, because this is definitely a battle that you're going to expect leaders at all echelon to be carrying on commander's intent, and you're going to rely on those actions to help synchronize the brigade fight. And then the second thing I think is probably the most important is that they were willing to learn every day. So, we faced a lot of challenges, and I think there's a portion in the very beginning of this is that there's going to be an incredible amount of stress. They're going to be tested in terms of personnel manning, your systems and your processes, and you're going to run through some challenges, and it's going to get to that point where it seems like, it's a tipping point where your brigade is almost going to seem like it's going to stand still for a second. And it's going to take leaders at all echelons to kind of work through that. And then after you kind of work through that friction, and I would say it's anywhere from about day 2 to day 4, they'll start gaining their footing. They'll recognize the things that are within the environment, the open phasing and the challenges of this, and they start to gain some ground back. And it's kind of like when you're walking at dark, in the dark, you start to learn to feel the ground with your feet, and you start to get a little bit more comfortable. And that's whether you understand the terrain, it's maneuvering, both the mounted and dismounted fight, integration of fires, and how to synchronize everything where you can mass your brigade in this piece. But I think the two things is the standards and discipline, and it's the willingness to learn every day, because you will, as the COG has said, you'll be tested. All these things that your brigade will have done, individually at some point, but they've never been tested in this environment and at this pace. And so you'll learn a lot about your organization.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Sergeant Major, what are your thoughts?
I believe that our Army is two things. I believe we have, the greatest Army in the world, and the first one is we're very, very good about being harsh on each other, and harsh in a way that allows us to get better. And every day that we've been out here, I've seen the brigade every day get better. So it's been very rewarding to see that. And the second part of that, second reason we're the greatest Army in the world is because we have a very well-defined NCO Corps. And unlike other armies, our officers allow NCOs to be postured at friction points, to make decisions that NCOs in other armies aren't allowed to make. And it requires a level of trust there. And it doesn't just happen overnight. And I think watching the brigade grow, over the last year since I've been here, watching the brigade grow since Colonel Chung's been here. He's really empowered the NCO Corps since he's been here, and it's made a significant difference because our NCOs are out doing things, posturing themselves at friction points, making sure that they understand their role in the fight, and it's been very rewarding to see them grow and get better.
I'd like to ask you for a second to expand on that, about how NCOs who know they're coming to NTC, or even deployed to maybe a theater somewhere, how they can fill those roles and responsibilities to the most effective way possible. How can an NCO prepare himself or herself to be in the fight here and to be the maximum effort for the team?
Well, I think that our NCOs cannot be one-trick ponies. Like, they've got to understand that, for example, sustainment and medevac are very NCO-centric and driven, but those are only 2 friction points of many. And I think NCOs that truly understand the current fight, understand how we fight as a brigade, are able to, again, posture themselves at friction points and are truly able to paint the picture for paint the bigger picture for their commander, because they're the extension of their commander's influence. And I can move around the battlefield and be in a lot of different places throughout the day where he can't be, and I'm his eyes and ears, and I can come back and say, hey sir, I know this is what you think you're hearing or seeing. Here through my my lens, my perspective, here's the other half of that problem, to give him better context.
And you guys have those moments during the rotation?
Yeah,
here?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add to that, completely agree with what Command Sergeant Major's talking about, but if you start off, for any brigade staff, as they work through their battle rhythm event, and so if you start off with a bub and it truly provides you running estimates, you'll get a sense of what's going on across your brigade, and it gives the Command Sergeant Major really an area to say, hey, that's probably where I need to go down. Okay. And he'll find out, right, is it is an issue with establishing staging areas, as we're getting ready to build task organization and integrating enablers for the next mission. Is it has to do with, does he need to go to a point where, there's going to be a significant dismounted fight or a mounted fight? Does he need to go to a location where we think that there's going to be some unique challenges where we extended the locks and we've got to do some resupply for, a mission, or going to a point where we're getting ready to do transition of a different type of operation. But I think that, what I would offer, and I agree with him, and giving your command sergeant major that ability to have that freedom, and the same thing with battalion commanders. If you start off with running estimates, and a bub, and you have that battle rhythm that gives that initial sight picture of what's going on, it gives a good direction of where your senior enlisted advisor can put his focus on.
Okay, help fill the gaps there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Good. Well, sir, and Sergeant Major, I'd like to ask you, in what ways did the rotation surprise you? Maybe the environment, the enemy, the pace of operations. What was just a shocker to you?
I'll start off by saying I think that we knew ourselves in terms of what our strengths were and what sort of our shortcomings were. What I did not anticipate is how quickly they would be highlighted. Okay. So, for example, we have a very talented staff, and their efforts and really we're built to build plans that have the opportunity to spend a lot of time and go through that, and we didn't have the same amount of emphasis in our current ops. And so that transition, that works for the first operation, but the moment you get a frago, that now you're having 2 operations that you've got to plan, and at the same time work through all the synchronization and rehearsals to make sure that you can feed that with enough 1/3, 2/3, or 1/5, 4/5 down to your battalions, and at the same time you're transitioning this back to the current ops, so they understand they can provide you the key information to help synchronize the operation and move toward the commander's intent and end state. I didn't anticipate that was going to end up being highlighted to us faster than it was. And then the second portion of it is it is truly open phasing. So I know there's a lot of experience with NTC, but when you're out here, the COG talks about it in the sense of this is a fighting stance. So your entire brigade will have to understand that their number one priority needs to be fighting enemy contact. So, and that's all across the entire battlefield architecture. It's not just those that are within the close, you know, it's all the way through your support area and within the rear, and as you're consolidating and move things up to the close and then beyond. So that the challenge on that aspect of it is, as guys are looking at that, it's pretty difficult in the sense that if you're not thinking through some of those things quickly, you will quickly understand, or you'll quickly realize as a staff that you're only going to be able to focus on one area, and you're going to end up, you know, not providing the same emphasis on two different things. So you'll quickly highlight that aspect of it. The second portion is just the environment. So there's the difficulty of terrain that you have to manage, and that's managing terrain across different pieces of battlefield architecture. But we are very objective centric, in my opinion, a lot of times. So whether it's we focus, what I would offer any BCT is, number one, always look to try to manage avenues of approach that the enemy could infiltrate your battlefield architecture. Okay. And if somebody's managing that within your IC collection, that helps you understand where you can then, you know, in their scheme maneuver, where then you can manage your combat power. Okay. And every day you should be trying to posture yourself so you can mass your brigade against this enemy, which is going to be faster, which is going to be able to outrange you in artillery, and they have the capability to jam you, just as you mentioned, open phasing, spoiling attacks. So your experience of the environment, the understanding truly about this terrain, and then the pace of operations that your staff's going to have to endure is something that you're going to quickly realize in the first 48 to 72 hours.
Because we can't replicate it really anywhere else.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So Major, what surprised you about the rotation?
I think that just to kind of piggyback on that, from an NCO perspective, and back to the last point we were talking about, our NCOs sometimes they're very good at solving and preventing problems, and that's their job. But a lot of times, what I found is they would be potentially solving the wrong problem. So it's a great problem to solve, but it's like, hey, I appreciate you getting that problem solved, Sergeant Major, but that would have been great 48 hours ago. But this is where I really need you to be focused. So that was exposed early on, and then the idea of introducing using the running estimates to help guide our senior NCOs in the right direction. Because when the machine gets moving, our commanders just want our NCOs to know where to go and be. And I think that we all assume that senior NCOs know where to be and what to do, but sometimes they need a little bit of guidance to making sure that what they're doing is relevant.
And nested with the effort, Roger.
Yeah, so and then just finishing up on the piece that you meant, that you were asking about, the surprising aspect is just the end result, right? Where your brigade's at, and we talk about this pause or this struggle that your brigade will have to then pick itself up and then continue to work through this. So, if you think through the point that you're going to recognize something within your staff and your battalion staffs about the pace is going to then wear on them, where they've got to be able to plan, prepare, and execute simultaneously. And then there's this piece about the terrain itself and how do you manage kind of tooth to tail across battlefield architecture. And then there's the enemy that you mentioned, right? So this is the near peer environment. So those three things combined will start to eat away at this thing called tempo. And that's the part, right? It'll start eating away against all the conditions you're trying to establish to synchronize operations, which then will affect your tempo. And then you'll find yourself at that point looking to leaders and placing them directly in key friction points to try to gain this initiative back to move this large machine called a brigade combat team.
Okay. So did you gentlemen look at that personally, look at an operation or maybe a phase or a transition and say, we need a leader here to manage this problem. We need to put someone down here because we anticipate that either be a convergence of units, or maybe it's a task org change, or maybe it's just a friction point. So you were thinking that throughout the operation? Yeah.
I think that we did that in certain points that we identified naturally that there would be some friction pushing out of the Ruba. Sergeant Major was down there. He had the right, senior listed non-commissioned officers that were down there. I think Sergeant Major recognized that when we were executing any type of combined arms breach, that they had the right individuals that were there to help push the combat power to the next point. But at the same time, I think it's very easy based on the environment, specifically the terrain enemy, to get very focused on the close fight. That same level of emphasis needs to be placed on back in your support area within the rear. And as you're then consolidating, and managing terrain, that same leader emphasis and placed in friction points needs to be just as deliberately, thought through, as we were doing for operations of getting out into the Aruba, staging and, executing a task organization, moving key things up to, push engineer or, CCL or class 4s, equipment that's up in the front. I don't know if looking back on that, we had placed that same level of emphasis that we'd saw friction points forward of us that we'd have recognized until it became to the point where, your BSA is being attacked every day. You're losing engineer assets back in the rear, and then it's like, we probably need to put that same emphasis.
Okay.
And that's really something that you got to start doing well before you show up at NTC.
Okay.
Is identifying friction points and then pausing and saying what leader is going to lead this and who's the right leader for whatever it is. And then whenever you get here, it's just part of your battle drill, and I think we found huge success with that.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that the one thing that I take away from this is about the ability that when you have friction, how does your brigade and who does your brigade with their systems and processes look to quickly then say, okay, some things have happened, what do we do, generate some options, and then everybody moves forward with this fight for shared understanding. If we don't know who that is, then we're calling everybody we think should know and provide the right information, and then we start losing these conditions, and op tempo starts to or tempo starts to get impacted.
I feel like that the brigade was postured in a good way as far as command and control systems to be able to react. I mean, your brigade came in and FM, upper TI, SATCOM, all the systems inside of the Striker, CPOP, that was all jamming really good. And so it felt like you had the ability to flex and respond and get commanders up on the net and figure out problems along the way. That was pretty good. I think it's a testament to home station training and the validation exercise you did here in RSOI.
What I'd offer is that, for commanders to sit down and think through, I purposely focused on the warfighting function, within communication, and mission command, and I honestly did not place that same level of emphasis across all the other warfighting functions, which, like I mentioned, will quickly come highlighted to you. But what I'd asked my six to do was, for example, we need to sit down and look at all the brigade retrans, all the retrans across the brigade to build a communication architecture so everybody's clear on what that PACE plan is. And if the PACE plan is not FM as the primary, then we make a deliberate decision on how we're mitigating that and what that primary is. So if you just look at your 3 brigade retrans and you say, hey, I have 3 brigade retrans that are retransing 4 nets, and then every other battalion you place your retrans, the battalions will place their retrans in a position so they can talk to their companies, their CTCPs and their FTCPs. It will not necessarily facilitate a communication architecture that really kind of establishes a cone to fight forward. So you can communicate with all the, your maneuver elements as you're executing this fight.
Keep it integrated.
It does, and it gives those that are in the rear, in the consolidation in the support area, the understanding of, okay, if this communication architecture is going toward the close fight, then I need to continue to move forward so I can get on FM.
Okay. And you guys built ad hoc, some ad hoc retrans, right, that you could deploy forward, right, sir?
We did.
Yeah.
I think that any opportunity that you have to kind of test the limits of how far your brigade can communicate. So I keep pushing my S6 to say, okay, we've gotten to 30K, let's push it to 40K. Let's try to push it beyond that. So, for example, if you can, build a JCR within a tough box that's, you can put on an aircraft, and you have a retrans capability that you can infill and quickly move to a key piece of terrain, that is a way that you can establish quickly. You can put it on a Striker, put it on a Humvee, whatever it is that you can get it quickly to a point and then integrate it into the fight, and so those understand. And I think the other thing, it helped provide some feedback of, okay, we say we have 16 retrans, but what's the no kidding min force that we need to fight? And then, as you mentioned, we were fortunate to be in an Inc. 2 brigade. So based on that, we were also able to bring an additional Smart T. So we were using all these different communication systems. So within my mobile command group itself, we had FM running, we had transverse chat, we had Titan, which is, CPOF, software-based JCR chat rooms. So when we did experience some jamming, we could immediately continue to get the same piece of information being passed in multiple different meetings.
Right, which is, I think, a key lesson out here. A lot of times we like to think, well, maybe we succumb to the idea that once the enemy is jamming, it's like, oh, they're jamming us. We can't do anything. We can't talk. But we have all these pipes we can talk on, and I think your brigade did that effectively, sir. Yeah. So I want to ask you about a tough. What was a tough part of the rotation here, right? So you went out of the Aruba. You went down to the south. You had a battalion in 117 up in Bike Lake. And then you put 2-1 down in the Valley of Death, and you established a hasty defense with 4-2-3 along Whale Gap, defending against an attack. Then went across up to Red Lake Pass, then up Siberian Ridge, and then turned the corner into the central corridor to the left there, grabbing the key pieces of terrain up into Bearsu, conducting the attack down the corridor into Razish. Great fight in there. All 3 battalions got into the mix there in Razish, and then across really 20 hours later into Ujin, which is pretty impressive to do that right away. Into Ujin and then up into the passes there before the end of the Force on Force. So over the course of all that, what do you think was the toughest part that sticks out in your mind? What was your hardest day, sir?
Well, I mean, ultimately it was the recon on Razish initially. So I'll start with that, and then I'll just kind of highlight, out of all those key elements, what I think I learned quickly out of that. So Razish, number one, was challenging for me. I personally felt like I'd let the brigade down by, starting with commander's visualization. I think they generally understood that, but we just didn't have the time to go through the right planning because we'd been exposed. We'd put some effort on the planning and previously, and brigade staff didn't get a chance. So we're trying to push through and synchronize something that commanders didn't get a chance to truly digest. And as we were working through some conditions, it's a perfect storm. You've got a commander that is unable to move to a piece of terrain on time. That's one of the key conditions, because you see that as decisive in order to accomplish your purpose. You got another commander that's also challenged with making contact, that he can't move to that location. And then you start realizing these conditions are falling out, but you still have this will of the commander that you're going to fight this to the very end, until you realize at what point do you probably need to take a pause, resync everybody. You maybe communicate with your higher headquarters and say, hey, we can continue to lead with our face on this, or I can stop, take a pause, let me reattack this thing like 8 hours later, or 12 hours later.
Which has got to be a key, really a skill, but a key something for the commander to realize when those things are not in sync, and not stay wedded to the plan, right? And
That's right.
Well, when 117 up in Bearsu, they had it. The enemy hit him at exactly the worst time when they were deploying out to the west to go take 780. To set conditions for Razish, and they got hit from the front and the rear of the column at the same time, and it could not happen at a worse time. Really.
That's right. And so, and then working your way back, how that all kind of leads to that point. So I mentioned about kind of managing terrain. So if you looked at, I looked at, the first problem set that they gave me was be able to defend at the Whale Gap. So I looked at, okay, hey, you got an enemy avenue of approach here that's coming through Bike Lake. I've got an avenue of approach that's coming over Siberian Ridge and potentially through the John Wayne foothills. And then you've got an avenue of approach that's coming through Red Lake Pass. So those are 4 problem sets right there, or 4 avenues that I have to take a look at and say, amongst my combat power, how can I then move combat power in there to deal with this, and then what am I shaping within the brigade? And as you look through how to move from the Ruba into this location, you can move to the Whale Gap, which there's a very limited canalizing terrain to get to that point, and then you can end up going through the shelf with a very limited number of types of vehicles. So what we looked at is, and I quickly learned in this first fight, we were able to get individuals up to Bicycle Lake and get to that pass and essentially attempt to really establish a blocking position. We were able to move through the Valley of Death pretty quick and build some combat power, and then move some their Cav squadron as far as we could, but almost kind of set up like an L or a U to establish an engagement area, and then place an element down here. The problem is that we never really established a security zone far enough that allowed us to quickly move maneuver elements in there and then build some engineering efforts. So we were in place for the defense. We ended up, they ended up executing this narrow penetration on us, and eventually we got attack aviation, but the synchronization of attack aviation coming in, an hour later, your reserve coming in, now you're fighting them to try to just achieve your purpose when they're south of the Will Gap. So, that's the frustration you kind of learn, and you as a commander are kind of, working through trying to, all these challenges that you have. Then the second portion of it is, once again, I quickly then pushed everybody back into these avenues of approach, which were great. But at the same point is, I went back and asked myself later on, through some coaching, of what was I really doing to shape the brigade. I mean, some great fighting. We had a battalion that went through and fought through, Nebron and after Orta for the airfield, got into the John Wayne foothills, back up there in Bicycle Lake. But now the challenge is what do I have at the brigade, both through my organic and then EABs, that's allowing me to then continue to look a little bit further deep, so I can establish that security zone and then push the brigade. And then I think all this portion of like kind of fighting our way out of this, and not really, besides it using maneuver, was getting the opportunity to shape, get elements up there to embarrass you, and then turn around. I think right at this point, it was realizing if we had a chance to get even into Razish, we had to really take a look at looking at all the key pieces of terrain that were decisive, that we needed to be able to just to have a chance to mask on my power. But out of all those pieces that were decisive, there are key terrains that you have to fight to even get to that point. And so I think that 48-hour period was the part that I quickly realized, okay, there's a portion where we got to be able to shape. There's a portion that we got to be able to quickly maneuver to this. We've got to have commanders that understand about tempo. They're just not executing their own battalion fight. To have a chance to actually get into Razish, to have, at least 2 battalions to fight that fight, and it's
which you do.
Yeah,
absolutely, sir.
And then the next portion is, I think that every one of these things, you just can't plan to the objective. You have to plan beyond the objective, and what that that transition, and when you really talk end state, what do you see those formations looking like at the end? And there's that management of terrain and boundaries. Otherwise, you'll be giving up that 1 to 3 kilometers that you fought in the close as guys kind of reset, because and that's the part that I think that there's a mindset that's different, because everything we do, whether we're training in a live fire, a force on force, or in an exeval, if there's a pause and it still seems like there's a start and a stop, then that's the disadvantage that you're going to end up having.
Yeah, that's right, sir. Kind of like what you said about being an objective-based mindset. Like we move from one discrete objective to the next to the next. But really, Razish encompasses Moose Gardens and the terrain that's just beyond that.
That's
right.
So
you have to expand out to that even right after you attack Razish.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Sergeant Major, what are your thoughts about the tough days out there? What did you feel like?
I mean, in hindsight, I think Razish was actually a success getting to Recock. I mean, all the things that we did right on the second time, we'll walk away from that and remember all the good things and know that we got better each day. But it was incredibly frustrating at the time. But for me personally, I think we postured a lot of energy across the NCO Corps to make sure we uncoil correctly. And because if we screw that up, we knew that we would not have the tempo to get us beyond the first objective. But I think, we got out there, we put all that hard work into it, and then we stalled a little bit, defending Wells Gap. And it was frustrating, because I feel like I was probably still a little bit down and in on uncoiling, and I think that I should have been able to see a little bit further than just that. So it was frustrating that we did all that hard work. We established some great tempo. I think we may have even set a record or 2 in there, and then we weren't able to close that last 5%. So it exposed some things, and I think that was really the moment where we realized we weren't as good as we thought we were, and we were able to kind of look internally very quickly and truly start getting better. I think that was sort of that moment. So
to bounce back, at that moment,
But it was difficult to see that at the time.
Sure, yeah. I mean, at that point, everybody's been up for about 48 hours. Right. You're attacking through. You're just getting the dirt on you and trying to figure it out. Yeah, absolutely, Sergeant Major. So I want to ask you about organizational habits, processes, things that the commander, staff, and units must be able to do, whether it's working together as a team or maybe it's the operations process, or maybe it's PCCs, PCIs. Like, what do you think are the core elements that have to be present for a successful organization here?
So I think number one, it's it starts with the operations process, and your staff's got to know. So commander's got to provide some visualization. You got to be able to understand. And I talked to the COG about this. The one thing that I did appreciate his feedback is we never really had the conversation about not having a sound tactical plan. And he said, hey, I see that as really, you guys came in and had done the work to master the fundamentals of understanding battlefield architecture, to move quickly in there and understand, commanders understood what needed to be done to actually fight this enemy and how to mass. So in that instance, I would say everything that you do has got to be a simple plan that you can, rehearse and execute violently. In order to do that, number one, commanders have got to provide some visualization. How they see the fight, how they break down the battlefield architecture, and where they truly want to mass. Okay. I think that the second portion of it is your staff's got to be able to take that and then go through the operations process, and you need to be up front with them, and they need to understand how you receive information so you can quickly make decisions and provide guidance. And at the same time, even though that you may tailor a specific way of and what I would offer, a touch point at the receipt of the mission brief, a touch point after mission analysis, during COADEV, and then wargaming. You may not have the doctrinal amount of time to sit down, but you probably need to sit down with your staff, your 3 and your XO, and find out what that touch point is the minimum needs to look like. And then if you don't, where do you recognize that you're taking risk in this process? I think my staff is incredibly talented and understands the operation process very well, and they know what I want. But I think at the same point is, even though I've truncated the information to be presented to me, you still got to execute the long division on the back end. And so if you don't do that, then all we're doing is every time that you're skipping something, what you got to ask yourself is, do you know that you're skipping something, and then where is it going to have an impact?
How much risk that is. Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It feels like that the pace of the environment, the constant enemy contact, the first thing to go is the detailed planning that would happen.
That's right.
If the staff had all the time in the world, right, to synchronize.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then what I think that, we go back to this, then the second portion of it is if you're putting the emphasis in the operations process, then go and look to your own internal, battle rhythm that you have back at home station. So what are the touch points that you have with your battalion? Do you do a CUB? Do you do a plans and ops update? And how often do you push this information out along with it? So if, essentially if you had some type of BUB that provides updates to running estimates, it kind of ends up serving as what you would get out of a mission analysis brief, particularly for that specific type of mission. And then all the warfighting functions could end up having their key syncs and meets that then leads to an ops sync, that with a frago and then commander's update at the end. But if you can figure that out, and you can see the same similarities that you would do in garrison, and then be able to have that conversation with your staff in terms of expectation and how they receive information, how you receive it, I think that'll be key for any unit that's coming.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Sergeant Major, what do you think?
I think that a lot of times we like to put safety in one hand and lethality in the other, and we really never talk about how those things complement each other. And I think for us, we have a few well-developed SOPs with respect to safety. We recognize that our number one threat to the force is our vehicles and the risks associated to that. And we put a lot of emphasis into making sure that we operate safely as possible. And the safer we recognize that the safer we are represents how lethal we will be. So every time I get a vehicle stuck in the mud, or I get a soldier hurt that has to leave the fight, that's a little bit of, that's a loss in our lethality. Yeah, so we try to correlate those things so soldiers know that every decision you make, every lapse in good judgment that you have, ultimately hurts our lethality as a brigade. And sometimes an active indiscipline can desync the entire brigade. So I think making sure culturally that we establish an environment where soldiers truly understand that is huge. That's really where it starts. And so something we tried to make sure the brigade was focused on is everything that we do across the brigade should be associated to a priority of work, whether it's an individual priority of work. So for example, when every Lancer knows that when they wake up in the morning, their first priority of work is to get ready to fight security, right? So you wake up whenever that is, and you pack all your stuff away and you get your kit on, and then within about 4 minutes you're ready to fight. And then you can transition to the next priority of work, whatever that is, whether it's a collective priority of work or it's an individual priority of work. As long as we're always thinking in priorities of work, I think that we're able to manage our time very effectively, and we're able to contribute to our brigade's lethality. And I think that, what it really comes back to is just having good order and discipline across your brigade, and you got to establish an environment where soldiers appreciate that, and they know that when they miss the mark, they're going to be held accountable. Every leader in the brigade,
right,
or every soldier in the brigade, from the colonel to the new soldier.
Data. I mean, the data shows that the brigade hit that mark with safety pretty good. I mean, it was a low number of incidents, thankfully, and so I think that's a testament of what you're talking about for sure. Yeah. I want to ask you about casualties, and then we'll finish up with where do you take it from here? So what's the training path ahead? But CASEVAC typically is a recurring conversation about best TTPs and how do we tackle it. Typically falling in the NCO Corps, and usually a conversation with first sergeants and command sergeants majors here. How did you look at that? Did you make any tweaks to the system? What was your approach here, and how do you think we did with that?
Well, I think that it's important for us to understand is, we have a lot of talks about the math and, what the percentage should be and survivability rates and all that stuff. And we have a tendency to look at all the numbers as we should. And so there's a lot of science involved there, and there's a very deliberate system on the medical side that helps guide us. But at the end of the day, we as the United States Army, we've got to in large-scale combat operations, we can't have dead and wounded soldiers lying all over the battlefield. We have to have a system in place to efficiently and quickly as possible police up our wounded and dead and get them evacuated as fast as possible. And so, if the NCO Corps doesn't care about it, then it probably isn't going to get done as efficiently as it could. So that's why the NCOs have such a huge role in it. And there's a balance of, you can throw your senior NCOs at any problem and it'll get solved. We could probably walk away from an NTC rotation with 90+% survivability if all our senior NCOs did was surge on evacuating our casualties. But our NCO, back to my original point, is our NCO Corps can't just be good at one or two things. We've got to be able to posture to proactively prevent and solve problems. And so for us, and what I've been trying to do is coach our NCOs to be in the fight where they can help their commanders paint the picture, solve problems. So ultimately, we end up preventing some of those casualties. So that's the first step, getting them in the fight, postured where they need to be. And then when we do have casualties and it is a friction point, then that's when they make that very deliberate transition and focus at the right place, right time to help evacuate our dead and wounded. And then the other side of that is being involved on the sustainment side and just making sure that they understand the plan, because our medical officers and our sustainers who are responsible for building that plan, a lot of times, in most cases, they don't have any experience or very little experience what it truly feels like to pick up a casualty and move that casualty from the point of injury and get them back all to roll one. And it requires a lot of grit to be able to continue to push soldiers forward and fight the fight, and at the same time, pick up a wounded soldier and carry him down or up the side of a mountain. There's a lot of grit associated to that, and I don't think that they truly have an appreciation for that. So our NCOs, senior NCOs who have done that and do have a lot of experience, have to be involved in that process so that they know exactly where that roll one should be located or where those assets should be used best. And I think that if we're doing those things during the planning, and then we have a very well-developed system from point of injury to really the CCP. We talk about point of injury to roll 1 and how our numbers are not great, that we struggle the most there, and then roll 1 to roll 2, it drops significantly down to like 6 or 8%, right? So but my experience here is, and this being really my first NTC rotation, is what I found is all of our problems are really between the point of injury and the CCP, and I think that's where our dilemma is, because you've got to balance. I got to continue to fight the fight. So if I pull an 80-litter team off the line to move casualties, then now the rest of the force is at more risk, right? So I may have to. So sometimes the best thing for a casualty is for everybody to continue to fight enemy contact, close with and destroy the enemy, eliminate that threat so that we can consolidate, reorganize, and then surge our efforts to evacuating our wounded and dead. So that's really the balance that we've got to find, and really it's different for every scenario out here. It changes. So you can't just recycle the same thing you did last time. You've got to look at every one of these problems, and then use the best TTP or practice that you think that will help you get through that, so that you can, because the numbers at the end of the day don't matter. Only thing that matters is that we have done our best to evacuate our dead and wounded off the battlefield.
Yeah, good point, Tom Major. I feel like there's a moment of awareness that units go through when they get here and we're working the decisive action and large-scale combat operations scenario versus maybe wide area security when you have 1s and 2s versus the 20 or 40 or 50 casualties at a time, say coming out of Razish or whatnot. That can be a load on the system that we're all really as an Army kind of getting, understanding how to absorb. Where to take it from here, sir? Right. So you're 3 months in command. You got a collective brigade home station exercise under your belt as a command team. You got a NTC rotation now, and you have another 20 months to take the brigade and continue that momentum in a direction. So where do you take it from here?
So I'll start kind of with personnel. What I would offer to any brigade commander that's coming in is that there's certain personnel that you probably need to be involved with the final approval of them being placed before they're placed in that position.
Okay.
So, for example, a UAV platoon leader. You got to know that that's the right individual that is going to be a key organic, brigade asset that you need in your IC collection. So it's not just an intel, leave it up to the 2 or the BEB. They're absolutely key stakeholders. So, and I've talked to the COG about this as well, selection of the right individual for SSA, who's going to be your chief of plans. And I think those are key positions when you bring in, your XO, your 3, your BEB commander, BSB commander, and say, what are the key positions that are going to highlight that we're going to have those individuals working directly from the brigade at some aspect of it that we need to know. So that'd be one, personnel-wise.
Okay.
I think the second thing is you got to look at some processes across the board. So one, I think any time that you're building reps through the ops process, I didn't mention there about commander's intent. So for any brigade commander that's coming in after me, I would offer to them is, your commander's intent, you got to write it, and number 2 is you got to sharpen it every day. So even if you're not rewriting it, you've got to be able to find a way that you're continuing to communicate it. And so if you're not building that at home station and think through how you're delivering it. So it's best obviously to write it down and they can have something they can think through this and then come back and ask questions about it. But it's not just one of those fire and forget. So you got to be able to give it to them and then give an opportunity for your commanders to help kind of clarify, whether that's through back briefs and rehearsals, and ideally if it's over Ventrilo or if it's over CPOF at some aspect of it, or SVoIP, but it's got to be several different means, but you've got to be able to communicate it every day, especially as you're going through this open phasing challenge. But I think you got to get reps in the ops process. Okay. And so you got to find ways to go through it, and it doesn't have to be just simply pull the entire staff, set your CP up and go through planning. I mean, you got to find ways to execute the same thing you would because you're doing open phasing back in garrison. You're getting stuff from division, you're getting stuff.
That's right.
all the time from Corps or something like that, and you got to find a way, how do we continue to go through this, but at the same time we're transitioning stuff in a current ops role so they can fight for shared understanding. And so I think one of the things is you got to look at how you're organizing the staff to make sure you've got two key horizons, both current ops and plans.
Okay.
And then the third aspect that I think it is training. So for us, I'll be honest with you, in the first 100 days I had an opportunity to go through a CTE. It gave us a good look of understanding the staff and some of the things I think that we're pretty good with. The things I was comfortable with, I kind of put to the side and said, I know we're going to have to get back to it. I really focused on the companies, mainly more dismounted than the integration of both mounted and dismounted. Okay. And then with a little bit of incorporation of fire support, but not complete integration, and some key things with enablers. And then had an opportunity then obviously to come out here. So I would go back and look at it and saying, how are we doing in XFL for all our UAVs? So we're synchronized that entire IC collection warfighting plan. So it's not just Shadow going up, it's Shadow, it's Ravens, it's Pumas, and how are you building a collection plan? How are you managing that terrain? How you're building, air corridors and the RASs within TAES, and so everybody understands that before you get out there. Similar to what we kind of did with the, the comms architecture amongst all the sixes and the retrans.
Okay.
I think that you got to be able to look at and say, how are we integrating? So, I mean, the one precious commodity that we don't have enough of is going to be time. So I don't think we're afforded the chance to say, okay, I'm doing these 6 weeks of gunnery, and then I'm going to go back and do 6 weeks of, from marksmanship all the way up to platoon level, execution. I've got to find a way where I'm rolling both my vehicle platforms to incorporate some aspect of the dismounted fight as well, and then truly try to push it to the point where we're executing some type of combined arms. So FSCXs, if we're not doing walk and shoots, if we're not doing fire support coordination exercises, if we're not testing and validating FSOs to work through a clearance of primary and alternate observers, even just in a basic synchronization of, okay, combined arms breach and put them in, the call for fire, scenario, and we all have those simulations. I think those are the reps that we need. And I think you got to do it in a point where you're kind of doing it in a cold status. You give them a mission quickly and then give them another thing on top of that. I think there's some energy that needs to be placed on against recon and surveillance. So we put a lot of emphasis when it comes to building out, objective T and hitting all the live fire gates for platoons and companies. There needs to be that same emphasis when it comes to the troops and executing CAV squadrons, because the first time the brigade combat team actually has is when he's a BCT commander. So do they truly understand how to establish that security zone? So I would offer going back and, every time if it's a chance for a troop to establish a security zone, just in a move out, to the field, and then working through how you're doing an R-pull or an F-pull.
Again, an integrated.
It's every chance to do that is key. I think it's worth building proponencies amongst your units to be responsible for updating key things in your tax ops and your TTPs. And then I think there's certain things that you got to find that you have to centralize across your brigade for shared understanding. So certain things in planning products, certain things in fighting products. So quickly, when you do have that friction, commanders and your staff can quickly go back, reference the same thing, and then be able to help provide and generate some options and resync so you can continue to move forward.
Yeah, right, sir. Yeah, it becomes a habit at that point. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sergeant Major, what are your thoughts about going forward here?
I think I agree with the Lancer 6 here. Getting back and having an opportunity to focus on resetting the team. We're going to roll into to EIB as soon as we get back. So I'm looking forward to that, because it's really an opportunity for us to teach our soldiers to appreciate being experts with their hands and weapons. And I think that across the brigade, one of my biggest frustrations with our younger soldiers is they don't have I'd like to see them with a well-developed sense of urgency, so that whatever task they're given, whatever it is, that they're doing that task as fast as they can, safely as they can, and with a very high standard. And I think that if we are able to teach our new soldiers, that early on, those are going to be the same soldiers that are going to be NCOs before we know it, that are going to be asked to lead those same things. And I think that we, as NCOs, we owe it to our commanders to whatever it is, whatever the task is, to get it done as fast as possible, so that we're always in this continuous status of being ready, ready to go, whatever it is. And I think sometimes where we got caught short at NTC is sometimes we're just a little bit too deliberate, as if we just had all the time in the world to get the task done. And it really, I could really see it, being the Brigade Sergeant Major, I could see at the lowest level task getting completed, and in the same, in an hour later, I could see Lancer 6 giving guidance, to make sure that the brigade stays synchronized. And I can see when a fire team isn't moving fast enough, and how you have multiple fire teams across the brigade that don't have a well-developed sense of urgency, how that adds up, and it can completely desync the entire brigade. So I think just teaching our soldiers to continue to create this culture where soldiers are always completing every task as fast as they can, and being safe as possible whenever they're doing that will again increase our lethality across the brigade. So I'm excited that we'll have an opportunity to kind of reinforce some of those things, and no better place to do that than during EIB.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Well, before we close out, I'd just like to turn over if you have any comments or closing thoughts here about the rotation. It was fantastic when Lancers did a great job out here. The learning curve continued up and up, and definitely more ready in lethal formation than when you came in, sir, Sergeant Major. So congratulations on that.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Drew. I think this is great. With units that leave and get a chance to share, firsthand. I mean, this is less than 24 hours ago. Sitting there and sharing what's fresh in your mind. I tell you, there's nowhere else that you get a chance to execute this first-class event. And if I was a brigade commander, I'd be looking for that. I mean, and ideally, if it's early in your career, you get a chance to do kind of what I'm doing afterwards, and then refocus. If you're at the end of your career, I'd be absolutely soaking every chance that I can, and listening to people that had gone through and trying to learning vicariously through their experiences. But there's an incredible aspect of when you have a professional, a group of observer controllers and trainers that have seen so many different versions of you and watched through the challenges they have. That's the only way you're going to get a chance to see yourselves, and then highlight some things that you can then adjust off of within your brigade. The other thing is you're fighting the premier near peer right now, and that is going to outmatch you in range. That's going to continue to fight you throughout, the entire battlefield across multiple domains, and they're going to test you, and there's no other way that you're going to be able to experience that. You can replicate some of that stuff at home station, but you're not going to get a chance to do that. But I would tell you,
Can do a drone swarm back at JB.
That's right. You can't do a drone swarm or PCAM or PCAM strike and then have a fallen angel all in the same thing.
Right. Yes, sir.
And as you're trying to mission command this entire thing. But I tell you, thanks to the ops groups, all the critter teams, incredibly professional, outfit to give units a good look, to enable to see themselves and walk away with a tremendous amount of things that we can prioritize with our tax ops, our personnel systems, and our processes. And thanks to the Black Horse team, incredibly professional, opposing force that keeps you in a fighting stance, that allows you to continue to resonate that message that, your number one, focus for any soldier, regardless of MOS, needs to be fighting enemy contact. And there's a lot of things I think that you go through this, the last thing that, it's all about, like Sergeant Major was talking about, this will to prepare, and this it's about solving problems, and these problems get stacked up to to the brigade level, where the brigade then can only, based on all these capabilities and processes and systems they have, to manage transitions. So in open phasing, you can execute an attack, but immediately through that transition, there is something else going on within your brigade.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And those units that can manage those transitions pretty well and continue to execute, like Sergeant Major is saying, from the lowest level all the way up to, staffs at your brigade, those are the units that are going to quickly, move through this and be able to survive, 170 kilometers, 233 plus hours of contact, because they'll see it. There's no doubt that they can execute individual singular operations, but you string them all together with the induced friction at pace, is going to be the things that they're going to have to quickly figure out what else needs to be happening.
Yeah, great.
But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sir, yeah, it was a great rotation. Sergeant Major, anything to close on?
I'll tell you guys, I didn't know what to expect coming to NTC. This is my first rotation here, and you know the perception that you could, you know, through the stories you've heard is sometimes you have OCTs that kind of sit back with their arms crossed, don't really ever say anything, badmouth you behind your back,
Sunglasses all dark, just writing in the book.
Writing who knows what in their books, and so you know you got to mentally prepare yourself that, and regardless of who you have, who's working with you, who your coach is, you got to be able to turn and take that feedback, what you get, and be able to get better each day. But what I found coming here, and I think that you guys have sort of cracked the code on this, and you might not even realize it, is that the sense that I got was it was a team of OCTs who wanted the organization to be successful. It was like you had a team of coaches that were on your side, that wanted to do everything they could to help you defeat the OPT4 and be successful. And at the same time, they're not going to give you the answers to the test, and nor do we want that, because it's not going to help us get better. But you were able to help us see ourselves, expose the right things, and I think that's the right approach. Now seeing it here, you know, the perspective I had, and then actually seeing it for myself, is I think it's the right approach, because I think that there might be a little bit of distrust across the Army, with NTC, and so they're coming here and they're sort of already putting up that guard, expecting all you know, sort of the bad, you know, the bad things from what they've heard, and I think that it's important that you guys are using this approach, because it builds trust, and organizations will come here already be open to feedback and ready to get after it. And I think we can get, and then when you are giving them feedback, as harsh as it may be, I think that they're more likely, because they trust you, they're more likely to take that feedback and get better faster. So I think that, I don't know if you guys realize that, but you got some really good stuff going on here, based on the approach that you guys are using.
Great.
So
Great. Well, we appreciate those comments, because it's something we strive to do, and we're just honored to be a part of, you know, part of the Lancer Brigade through this training, you know, opportunity here. And I think too, it's to not share the lesson with the force is just an unacceptable, just an unacceptable scenario. And I think that we can all continue to grow. So thank you for taking the time, sir and Command Sergeant Major, for to spend here. It's been a long day of talking, a long day of AARs and whatnot, but Lancer's doing some really great things, and look forward to you know, seeing where you take the brigade after this. So,
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Cool. See you high ground, sir.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
thanks, sir.
Thanks, Sergeant Major. Good to go? All right. Thanks, team. Appreciate you running this.